Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Can you all hear me? Yes. Super. Welcome to this evening, which is going to be a little bit of a celebration, but also an education. Now, I think you've all worked out where the toilets are. Ladies, pink door on my right, and the gents, of course, with the pink door in the other hall, just by the excellent South African military display. Now, first and foremost, we have an acknowledgement to make. I acknowledge Senator Jacinta Price, Warren Mundine, who came to this hall and spoke to this group in February, and Matthew Sheehan of Advance Australia, and of course the donors and volunteers for tonight's event. And everyone here, we've come to celebrate a significant win for Western democracy.
Yes.
Now, what are you here for? The unseen dimensions of the voice. I won't go on too much about us because you've all got a flyer on your seat. Clearly, we're the people who are concerned about the takeover of our institutions by anti-Western ideologies. And that's one of the reasons why we are celebrating the defeat of the referendum. It's a triumph of Western parliamentary democracy and our principles of equality for all. Now, you're here tonight to learn about the unseen dimensions of the voice. You'll learn about aspects of Aboriginal culture that are hidden from public life and debate. The order of this evening, very simple. We'll start with my learned friend, Professor Augusto Zimmermann from the Western Australian Legal Theory Association, and the release of his new book, The Spirit Behind the Voice. Now, you may think that just because the referendum is over, that the issue is over. Well, it's not. And I think many of you realise that there is a hidden agenda. It's takeover, it's disruption, it's division, the creation of division in our society. And so you will learn a little bit more tonight. Most importantly, with Professor Augusto Zimmermann's edited book of chapters, is the introduction as written by a lady by the name of Bess Price. She is the mother of Jacinta Price, and you have the opportunity to read her words in the book, but also hear her words in tonight's film, which was made by Jacinta Price before she was elected to the Senate. The film lasts about an hour. We'll have a short break before it, after Professor Augusto Zimmermann has given his talk. And then after the film, we'll adjourn for our usual refreshments over coffee, recharged glasses, and of course there'll be books for sale. You'll have an opportunity to buy the book signed by the editor. And I'm also offering a few copies of Beyond Boundary Fences for sale. This book is out of print, and it's a series of chapters that you can read by themselves, like Augusto's edited volume. You can dip into the chapters, and it's the stories told by a policeman about his experiences in the Western Australian goldfields in the early part of the 20th century. And so, without further ado, I'll call up my learned friend, who will talk about one of his latest releases, Professor Augusto Zimmermann.
think it's a day of celebration. Saturday was a day of great relief and hope as well, because I was particularly delighted that we won by such a generous margin. And to be frank with you, I must say that we might have even gotten a margin that could potentially be wider. Can you hear now? Yeah. It could be wider even. I do not have confidence in the electoral system in Australia, the way votes are counted. I got my voter posting card or whatever. I didn't use it, but when I went to vote on a Saturday morning, one of the questions was whether I had voted already or not, which is a very disturbing question, you know, because I think it's almost suggesting people that they could have such a go and try such a thing. So I was amazed to see that even the Australian Electoral Office would disclose this information, that if you do vote twice or more, they are not going to be able to find out. And so basically saying, if you are a crook and you are really pushing for this destructive agenda, you should vote twice or thrice or whatever, how many times you want, as many times as you want. So we won by 70%, in my opinion. It was not 30, and the system in Australia is entirely corrupt. I probably this time, for the first time in my life, might have voted for the Labour Party because they were number 7 out of 10. And I put the Liberals at the very bottom this time in the federal election, thanks to Scott Morrison, because I feel that he was responsible for the primary culprit of what happened over the last 3 years or so, being the Prime Minister. He had, as a constitutional law professor, I can say he had the power to actually have helped us and even challenged the oppressive behavior of the premiers. But rather than doing that, he was supporting Dan Andrews, and he was clearly boasting about the victory of the Labour Party in Western Australia, even saying that the Labour Party won because he was supporting them. So this is the sort of Prime Minister, disgraceful human being that we had as a Prime Minister. I wrote a whole book about him that has only 300 pages, because then I got to know far more later, otherwise it would be 1,000 pages about deconstructing his despicable character. And I must say that Margaret Court should be ashamed of herself for having invited him to open the tower at Victory Life. That's one of the reasons as to why I'm no longer attending that church. I find it to be unacceptable to invite Scott Morrison to preach at that church. And although Margaret Court is my friend and I still love her, but it was a very serious mistake, and I think she has to repent for what she did. So let's talk about, I'm sorry, I'm going to be frank to you, you know, and I think it's important to be having an honest conversation. These are my opinions. What can I do? In times of madness, to have common sense is an act of bravery, perhaps. So the result of the voice referendum is most pleasing, of course. The Prime Minister asked the Australians to sign a blank cheque, and he got 0. We signed 0 there. We put 0 on the cheque. There is not so much doubt. There is no doubt whatsoever that the Prime Minister will try to achieve the same result by non-constitutional means. States are likely to set up voice-like constructs, and that's why I feel that this book is still extremely relevant, because I don't think the idea of the voice is going away, Karen. So the federal Labour government, led by this character called Albanese, has its own federal indigenous laws that it wants to pass in Parliament regardless of the voice. Of the voice enshrined in the Constitution, because the states are trying to enshrine the voice at the state level. These indigenous cultural laws essentially create an apartheid state with rent paid to the indigenous landowners ostensibly. Australians were asked by the government to institutionalize inequality by constitutionally enshrining separateness. As this lovely lady, Jacinta Price, the senator, pointed out, this was about entrenching racial separatism and the idea that Aboriginal people are perpetual victims forever in need of special measures. End of quote. Politicians who engineer these divisive laws, or divisive laws, are leading us down that dark corridor on the basis of race, thus prolonging the sorry history of racial difference. The ultimate goal is to divide our country into lines of culture, origin, ethnicity. That's why they also promote this dreadful idea of cultural diversity and gender diversity, whatever. But the whole idea is always to divide and conquer. That's the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to divide our country into lines of culture, origin, ethnicity, which obviously facilitates the attainment of more power and more control by the ruling, despicable, parasitical ruling classes in this country. We can only guess the level of hatred and division would be if this so-called voice to parliament were passed, and were foolish enough to have enshrined racial division in the Constitution. It's not guaranteed that an institution like the Voice will make any measurable difference for the indigenous Australians. Quite the contrary, it would probably aggravate the problem. The prevalence of passive welfare dependence in the indigenous communities appears to be directly responsible for the scourge of drugs, pornography, child abuse, and other ills that you are quite well known about. However, government programs to help welfare recipients tend to exacerbate all these problems by handing out welfare checks impersonally to all the potentially qualified. Without addressing the underlying behavioral problems, the government in essence is rewarding dysfunctional behavior that affects not only the recipient but the community at large. And I have taken the opportunity to write about this in my latest article in The Spectator, where I actually refer to the tragedy of welfare state in Australia. It's time to actually put an end to the welfare state. And if you want to know why I think in such a manner, read my paper that has just been published in The Spectator. It's about enslavement of people via this idea that the state is the ultimate provider and benevolent benefactor. It's only helping the bureaucrats and the politicians who are profiting basically at the expense of people's misery. Well, be that as it may, the undeniable truth that nobody would actually question is that, or should if they have at least half a brain, is that one of the great virtues of the Australian Constitution is its equal treatment of all citizens. Far from being racist, and I can prove it has never been so, our fundamental law is colorblind, and it treats everyone equally, no matter when they or their ancestors arrived here. It's entirely inappropriate to use the Constitution to promote one group over the rest of the population. At a philosophical level, the proposal of such a voice based on racial qualification is profoundly liberal, divisive, and inequitable. It would inevitably create permanent race-based qualifications that would turn Australia into a constitutionally endorsed two-tier discriminatory society. In this sense, the idea of equality before the law in Western democracies is traditionally derived from the Christian view of equality of all individuals in the sight of God. I'll explain why this is so. Because this sentiment is what directly motivated the drafters of the American Declaration of Independence to state the following, and I will quote now. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that everyone, all men and women, are created equal, that they are endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights, that amongst these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The statement of equality expressed in the words of the Declaration refers to the axiom that we are all members of the same human race because we are all created in the image of God. This view of the inherent dignity of every human being is an inheritance which is carved into the very foundations of Western constitutionalism. The Australian Constitution is inspired, or was inspired, by the American Constitution, and is based on the same Christian understanding of human equality, of the equality of all before the law. Hence, when speaking at the Australasian Constitutional Convention, Patrick Glynn of South Australia contended that it was to the nation's credit that it had the stamp of such Christian values fixed upon the front of our institutions. Indeed, the Commonwealth of Australia was initially understood to be the work of human hands, but also the invisible hand of God. The preamble, that part in the Constitution which lays out the hopes and aspirations of all parties involved, communicates that the Australian people humbly relying on the blessings of the Almighty God had agreed to unite in one indissoluble federal Commonwealth. Constitutional law professor Harry Irving comments that in that time, this acknowledgement received the strongest popular support of any part of the Australian Constitution. So no other part of the Constitution was so celebrated as that one acknowledging God and our nation as one indissoluble federal Commonwealth. Ultimately, enshrining the voice in the Constitution would undermine these values and the egalitarian nature of our Constitution. It inevitably leads us down to that dark corridor on the basis of race, thus prolonging the sorry history of racial difference that's so much promoted and endorsed by the parasitical elites in this nation. Sorry for calling them elites, by the way. Perhaps this was the hidden agenda, to further divide us into lines of culture, origin, ethnicity, that would obviously facilitate the attainment of more power and control by these ruling classes. Indeed, some people might have a vested interest in fomenting a socially divisive or divisive agenda that further undermines political equality and turns us, fellow Australian citizens, against each other. This is basically a revisitation of that old divide and conquer strategy that was so successfully applied by the ancient Romans. Accordingly, the ruling classes needed the voice to further divide you into racial lines and then parasitically dissect this nation from within. But the voice has been silenced because the sovereign people of Australia have manifested their voice. And we are going to be able now to see the desperation of these people and their attempt to continue this process of disruption and destruction, ultimately, of our nation. They hate you, they have always hated. I used to be a lawyer from commission for 5 years, and in my interaction with the politicians, first of all, of course, I have to acknowledge that it was an interesting experience because I got to know more about them. And I know how much they despise you. I know how much the politicians in this country do not seek the best interests of the people.
That's right.
You're talking about climate change, regarding population control and depopulation for a long time. I'm not going to say the name of this character, but you say that we are overpopulated in Australia. Imagine being one of the leaders here in Western Australia. So this is something that perhaps in the past, before COVID, some people were foolish enough to believe in these fantasies of elites, climate change. But now we are capable of knowing that this is actually, there is an agenda behind this. Is actually a fabrication. There's no such thing. The only thing they want is to create or fabricate a crisis. And you see that at the level of the United Nations now, they're going to vote. This is going to happen very soon. The idea of lockdown, emergency lockdowns. And if that doesn't go through the United Nations, the World Health Organization is also planning another pandemic lockdown. So if you feel that life is going back to normal, you're completely wrong. We might be in a sort of interregnum, because they are planning and plotting another crisis. But we need to defeat them. It's no time for appeasement. It's no time for compromise. It's time actually to take no hostages anymore. Now it's time for a battle, a fight. We have won a battle, and we deserve to celebrate. But we need to continue on guard. And that's why my book is so important, because the war goes on. Now is the time to be happy because we won that battle, but the war is far from being over. They are never going to give up, but so we also are not going to give up. We are going to continue a fight, because I believe that this is also operating the spiritual realm. That's why I say the spirit behind the voice. And I believe that we are going to prevail. I have confidence that the forces of light are going to defeat the forces of darkness. I feel very sorry for people who continue to be deceived by these parasitical people. But we now know that from now on, never they are going to deceive us again. And we are going to be able to resist. We are going to be able to tell our neighbors. We are going to be frank enough to explain this matter. And with confidence. Because we are going to make a difference. We are going to show the whole world that Australia will be something light and an example to the whole world that we can resist and that we will achieve the ultimate victory. The victory will be ours, and I feel that I have this mission. That's why I'm living here. I came from the other side of the world because God called me for a time such as this. I believe that we are going to make a revolution in this country, a revolution for freedom, for the rule of law, and for individual rights and liberties in general. The victory is ours. I promise this to you. Let's be faithful to this, and let's fight the good fight to the very end. The price of liberty is eternal.
Yes, well done, Augusto, indeed. Whew, that's heavy stuff. I'll have a short break while I play with the high-tech stuff just before the film starts. So 5 minutes, recharge your glasses, have a loo break, grab any food if you're still hungry, and see you back in about 5 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, resume your seats, please. And I can tell you a little bit of, tell you something about this film. I've already mentioned that it does feature Bess Price, who was the mother of Jacinta Price, and Bess Price also wrote the foreword to Augusto's edited volume. So you can not only read her words, you can listen to them tonight. And something I can also tell you is that after years of running remote area expeditions, Joe and I have been to Yuendamu several times, and I can assure you that everything that you're going to see in this film is authentic.
I've been a cross-cultural educator along with my parents for over 20 years, and there is a lot of talk, there is a lot of talk amongst our political leaders, amongst, certainly people of Indigenous heritage in this country about the idea of truth-telling. But I suspect that idea is more about pushing that narrative onto the rest of Australia. The rest of Australia has to somehow repent for the sins of the past, even though the rest of Australia, like us now, weren't there when those things happened.
Righto, ladies and gentlemen, just to wrap this formal bit over, this was always in two parts. The seminar was in the voice and the culture. In the voice was Augusto's book, and as you saw, Best Price was a major actor, we call it that in that, and also did the forward in his book. There is absolutely no doubt that the most brilliant result we've had in this referendum was to a great part due to the star Jacinta Price. She never ever wavered from her lines, which was division. Monday was good, but he wobbled a bit. But I would like to give a word a bit about Matthew Shear. He is the CEO, or whatever he calls himself, of Advance. Some of you will have had a letter from him today saying, sign up, because he did an amazing job. He came in when the referendum was in its very early days, had a think and said, what the hell do we do? And set about trying to do something. And he came up with a logo, or whatever you call it, saying, the voice of division. No doubt aided by Jacinta. And he held firm for that for 6 months, and never varied. He also raised all the money, which we got, because when he started, the No campaign had absolutely nothing. Although he did claim it had $1 million, but it was $1 million worth of promises. Some of us know a little bit about promises of money. It doesn't always happen. It was indeed a David and Goliath event, and Matthew Sheeran, as the organiser, also deserved congratulations. Now the culture. The films you've seen, and the book, I think Marion talks a lot about the culture. He was a policeman in the turn of the century, 1890, 1910, out in the outback, and he spent most of his time hunting niggers, because the niggers were killing the cows. But he speaks totally honestly about the terrible culture they have, and it's worth reading for that reason, but also with sympathy for what the blackfellows have lost. It's a very good book, and I'm going to finish with a little story. The other day at Bentley, which is a horrible place, by the way, sorry about anyone who lives there, we were pre-polling, and there were the usual gang of yes pollers outnumbering us, and one particular arrogant prick who came from Argentina, which, as you know, is if you ever want to see anything, to see how those wealthiest countries, one of the wealthiest countries in the world became one of the poorest countries in the world, go to Argentina. And I'm sure this fellow would have played his part, but he was a bit young. Anyhow, he was pontificating and telling everyone, of course, I'm a political philosopher, etc. And I didn't really like him. And then he set about talking to Kimura, who was a Maori lady for the No campaign. And he was pontificating on, oh, you know how, they stole all the children. Now, I had just read, I don't read much, by the way, just read a bit in that book. And I stood him up, and you never stand anyone up when you're polling with the enemy, because it ends up in a disaster. This didn't. And I said, listen, first point is, the police took these people, and the children were half-caste. Oh, what's a half-caste? So I think, God, he's well educated, isn't he? And I said they took them, and it was the worst job they ever had, because taking a child away from a mother, the father's a bugger off somewhere, taking it from a mother and a mother giving up a child is heartbreaking. And the police tried to avoid it and leave it to the next police, but they couldn't. Because he knew that the half-caste born in the tribe, over 50% were killed at birth. Bang. The other 50% sort of got away with mother, lived a life of total degradation and prostitution, and were all dead at a very young age. And I said to this little bastard, well, he wasn't that little, but he was a bastard, I said, now go and do your homework. And I must say, big success. He never talked to me again. And actually, he shut up. So, on that happy note, that's 2 wins. And look, please buy the books, have a drink, and have a chat, because we are commemorating a most incredible success of a people and democracy against the elite. So thank you all. Oh, one more thing. Oh, very important thing. I'll turn this thing off. Most important thing. Our next event, Civilisationists, is on the 22nd of November in this hall, and Commodore Dowsing, who has just retired from HMAS Sterling, is going to be talking on AUKUS for submarines. Well, I think I've got to lock him in on that a bit. And Slade, wherever Slade is, Slade, oh, there it is. The Commodore is actually a helicopter pilot, so I've asked him to talk about submarines. Now, we haven't got a raffle, but we've got quite fantastic. And Marion, you might like to get one of them. We have available 3 incredibly historic, valuable hats, all for free. The first people to get here can have one. And, all right, here comes Tony. And we have, here comes Slade. And we need one more. And one for Stephen. Now, we've got 2 t-shirts. They're not suitable for women. Well, if they are suitable for you, to be honest, they're somewhat large. But one to go, absolutely free. I'll have to start asking for money soon if someone doesn't
Like
take
an
it.
extra large.
Oh, we got one over there. I know, thank you. All right, sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Now you can go and relax and enjoy yourself.
Just trying to find out more
Yeah. Great to see you. Yeah, Hercock. Yeah, I know. Hey, Harry. Good to see you.
Are you standing around?
All right, I want to know.
I was on your way out. I've just given people to chuck their name tags. So they've got
I'm well on the way, and it's fantastic. And I'm going to pass
Oh, right, good.
to the next person.
It's so good to see you, by the way. You're such a special friend.
Oh, thank you.